video, we're going to talk about the process for actually creating a client once we've completed our searches and made sure that our client doesn't exist in the system. Again, want to emphasize that we want to always start our searches with the head of household's record, and if we don't find the head of household, we're going to create a new record and a new household. So in this case, you can see I've already done my search. I've got some search results in the bottom, and I've completed the last of the 3 searches, which is the partial alias, and I have no matches. So I'm ready to start entering the head of household's information. I'm going to put in her first name, which is Mona, and her last name, which is Wright. I'm going to set her name data quality based on the information that I have. If she reported a full name to me, gave me an ID, or I can trust that it's a full name, I'll select full name. If it's a partial name, a code name, or some sort of method that we use for creating an anonymous client, I'll want to set that it's a partial, street, or code name. And depending on how you use the client refused in your continuum, you would set that in some cases. But generally, if it's a hidden client or client that's going to remain anonymous, you're going to use a code name or some sort of street name for the client instead of saying they don't know or they refuse their name. And we never want to say data not collected, because we should be collecting their name and identifying them before we put them in the system. So in this case, I'm going to select full name reported. I'm going to type out her full alias, which is Isabel, and I do know that sometimes she goes by Izzy, so I'm going to comma separate that and also put in Izzy as well. I'm going to put in her complete social security number, and then I'm going to set another required field here, which is the social security number data quality field. And then if I know the social security number, I'm going to put that in and identify whether or not she's a veteran. In this case, she was. So I'm going to set that here. Once I've put in all the information, I've got the name in case sensitive and appropriate, I will go ahead and set this client. I see here that I've misspelled the last name, so I'm going to correct that now so I don't have to correct it later. And if this button is not active, because I came back into the screen even though I have some active results here, I'm going to click on search more to see if the client is a match, which it shouldn't be since I've already done my searches. And then I have the add new client with this information activated, which means that I can't get that button activated without doing a search. And if I do an appropriate search, I should have seen my client, so we don't have a very good excuse if we're duplicating clients. We need to make sure we read the screen and check for those clients. At this point, I'm going to click Add New Client with this information, and I get 3 choices. So if you have ever played Let's Make a Deal, you want to make sure you always pick door number 2. Door number 1 is to add the client only, which we don't need to do because we started with the head of household. We want to make sure that we create the household that this person is the head of. So that means we're going to add the client and add a new household. And we don't need to add client and search households because we've started with our head of household. We know they're going to be the head, and we've already identified that they not only don't exist, but there are no households that they're in. And we'll talk about in a later module how to add additional clients to this household. So we're going to click on door number 2, add client, and add new household. And that takes us directly into the household information. Once we're in here, the first thing we want to do is set our household type. So whether it's a household of 1 or a household of 100, we're going to create a household and set the household type. In this case, I happen to know that I'm going to create a household for a couple with no children. That's what their intake says, so I'm going to click on that. See here that I also have exact same client search window that I had when I clicked on client point, right within the household screens. So now I can search for any other household member. It defaults our last name to other members that might have this same last name. Not typically how we do our searches, so I'm going to end up clearing that when I do my search, but I just want to point out that that's kind of a shortcut they tried to create for us at Bowman. And then I see at the bottom that I have in my list of selected clients my head of household that I set up already as a client. At this point, you see the client's ID, client number 64 in this case. It's a good time to record that client ID on the client's intake before you move on and lose track of this client or accidentally duplicate them. So in this case, I know I have another household member that I'm going to add. And I know his name is Johnny. And he's also got a last name right, but I'm going to start my search, as I said before, with the social security number, just as I did for the head of household. So I'm going to clear this out. I'm going to go to the social security number field and do my same partial search for social security number and see if I get any results. Click on the search button. Again, if I get any results, it shows me which clients I already have in the household. I got no matches on the social security number, so I can come back up, clear out that social security number, and do my partial first name, last name. So I know, like I said, it's Johnny, and also a right, and I will do a search on that partial first name, partial last name. I get no matches, so I can scroll back up, once again, clear that information, and do a partial alias search if he happens to have one. In this case, John might also go by Jack. So I'm going to click on search and see if there are any Jack rights. And I see that I get some hits here again on that alias, as I expect, because it's a broader search. No alias of Jack. These are not good matches for my Jack. One's a female, the other looks like it's not even the right person at all. So I'm going to go ahead and create this client right in the household screen. So Johnny Wright is the first name. Again, I need to set the whole name. I'm going to set that name data quality to full name. Put in his alias as well, any social security number that I have for him, and set my social security number data quality to full or partial based on what he gave me. And he is not a veteran, and I'm going to set that. And now I'm going to add my new with information. Done my searches in here, so it just reminds me that I need to do my searches before I add this client so I don't get duplicates. I've done that. I can click OK, and I see now my household has 2 members in it. I did fail to point out that these potentials they had been a match. I could have clicked on the green plus symbol here to move them down here into my selected clients list. And at this point, if Johnny is not supposed to be in this household, I would take him out of here. But he is. I just created him. He's put together in this household, and I can click continue. Once I continue, I'll move on into my complete household screen. And at this point, I see my house is set properly with it. Mona is our head of household, so I'm going to set her to yes for the household, and I'm going to set Johnny as being the spouse in this household. And I'll set the date that they've joined the household to the day before their project entry. In this case, they're entering the project on April 1st, so I'm going to set this to March 31st. Of 2015 for both of them. so that that household will exist when they go to enroll in our project. They may have actually been in that household much longer than that, but for the sake of documentation in the system and to report properly, we want to make sure household existed at least the day before their project entry. From this point, I can now see that I'm still on my head households record. I'm still in my head households record. I have her information up on the screen. If anything's incorrect, for instance, was incorrect before, I could correct that now by clicking on the pencil to bring up the fields to edit them. It does tell me that we'll change the client's unique ID. That's okay. If I need to edit the information, this is the place and time to do it. I don't, so I'm going to click cancel there and scroll down, and I can put in any other information that we may be collecting on that household record. If it's complete, or once this is complete, I will click on save for this client record, and then I will go over to the second client in that household, and I'll do the same thing and make sure that their information is added. For the sake of time right now, and for the sake of training, we're not going to enter any of the data, but it's important to note here that in this case, anything that's here as a blue item need to be recorded as part of your required data set in your continuum. Anything that's black and bold and has an asterisk after it, for instance, like the start date here, if you create an item in there, will also be a required field. So you may have some required data that you need to enter at this point. But for the sake of demonstrating how to add a client, add a member to a household, complete a household, set in their start date and the household relationship, that's all we wanted to accomplish in logging. I'm going to save and exit this client, and I'm going to save the rest of the training and